Hello, everybody. Welcome to this series, Nurturing Nature Schools. I am your host, Megan Duncan. I'm a foster mom. I am a positive behavior guide for nature school teams. Today we have Amber and Tiffany. We will introduce them more deeply in a second. We're going to be talking about all things vouchers and how that applies to your school. If you have a micro school, if you're thinking about coming up with some kind of program, there really is this parents are getting a lot more say in their children's education, which is amazing. And with these vouchers coming out, there's some pros and some cons that we really need to think about. I honestly don't know a whole lot about that. So I'm bringing on these two amazing ladies to give us their insight, their expertise to help you in your own journey of designing your own children's education or coming up with some kind of program to educate children, whatever that is for you. And so Amber Simon, Amber Simons, will you introduce yourself first, and then Tiffany will bring you on in a second.
Yes, awesome. Thanks, Megan. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for
Yeah.
being here, Tiffany. My name's Amber. I am the founder of a program called Unbound Earth School in South Carolina. I'm the mother to my daughter Hadley, who's 8.5 years old somehow.
Hmm.
And I really just love to advocate for freedom and learning, and in particular, right now, community-led learning. And so, yeah, in South Carolina, this topic that we're going to talk about is very relevant. And we'll get more into that later, but I'm excited to chat more about this topic.
Amazing. Thank you. Tiffany.
Yes. Okay, so I'm the founder of Tender Heart Ministries, which is a faith-based family outreach. And through that program, we have a Nature Explorers Homeschool Collective where project-based learning happens in a community and one-room schoolhouse style. We're very big on outdoor education. Just like Amber, we're also very big on having the freedom to educate in the way that we best can accommodate our children. So we have a lot of neurodivergent students in our classroom, just because they're drawn to the model that we have and it fits them. And so with that, we've been running for about the last 4 years. And then I started the Ultimate Homeschool Community podcast a few years ago. And that's really where we've been diving into some of the topics surrounding homeschooling. And that's also where I've been able to help micro school founders and educators that are looking to get into the industry of micro schools and other types of educational businesses. I have 3 kiddos myself, and so they keep me very busy. But I'm glad to be here with Megan, and yeah, looking forward to having this conversation. It's been a very hot topic in all the states.
Awesome. Let me just jump in here really quickly. I think we can all agree, us three here and anyone listening, this may cause some triggers of people. It is a hot topic for a lot of reasons, and I think we just want to make sure everyone understands this is not a dig against teachers.
No.
Teachers, we're all teachers actually, but they're certified teachers that are in the grind every day. They have our children's best interest at heart. They do this because they want to change the world in the best ways and serve these kiddos. And many of them feel just as stuck as our kiddos do, as we feel our kiddos are. And so this is everything we say is definitely with the space that teachers are incredible. They're the most giving people on our planet, I think. And so really appreciating everything that they do for us as we have these really intense, hard, meaningful conversations also. So two things are true there. And so I guess we can just kind of start with the overarching question of, you know, families are, we could go into the why of why are families, parents taking their kiddos out of the standard way that has always been done and having more say in their children's education. And it might, yeah, I don't know. Does anyone want to start with that conversation as we dig
Yeah.
into this?
I can chime in there. I
Okay.
think we saw, especially during COVID,
Hmm.
a lot of onion layers peeled back within the educational system because of the online transition and all of that. And parents were seeing some major gaps that weren't being cared for, especially for their students that needed maybe a little bit more help. And so, because of that, they are looking for a way out to find some kind of alternative. And that left a lot of students not getting their needs met with how school had to transition during that time period. But it also left a lot of parents questioning, well, what's actually going on in my child's school? And so it kind of showed them, not that the teachers are to blame here. It is the system. It is absolutely not their fault. They are doing what they are told to do or what they are allowed to do, because that was a big issue as well. And so we're also seeing a mass exodus because either we have more children that have needs that are going through the cracks, and they're just pushing them through, because we have some laws on the books, we have some bills, with the no child left behind and all these other um, programs that really just want to make sure kids are taken care of. But unfortunately, the system doesn't end up really the ability of the system doesn't allow for those children's needs to get met, whether they're exceptional, whether they're neurodivergent, whether they maybe have some learning disabilities or just medical disabilities. And so that is where we're seeing this exodus or increase in homeschooling in general. And then also for the parents who need a place to still put their kid, the microschooling industry has really increased. Now, on the paper, it doesn't look like a lot, but out in the real world, there are school boards that are closing. There are school systems that are starting to close because numbers, they're just not having the numbers. There's several that are condensing and combining schools. And we see this out in Texas, Arizona, some in Florida as well, where you have more of the ESA dollars. And this is because parents are seeking for alternatives that better suit their students. So that's just like a quick synopsis of what's going on.
Amber, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that's reflected where we are too. We've seen a huge shift in the amount of families who are choosing either homeschooling or some type of alternative learning in general, which is really awesome because there's some of us who can help offer resources for that. But then you have the other side of it also, because you have families who are vulnerable. You have families who are leaving the system because of everything that Tiffany just mentioned. They're kind of they're on their last straw, like, please help, so therefore very vulnerable. And a lot of families don't actually know all of their rights and or their responsibilities. And so I find it very interesting that we have this huge topic of the ESA or the ESTF in our state at a time where there's so many vulnerable families. And so that's what I'm looking forward to diving in to today, and just offering a little bit more clarity on or just advocating for families to really dive in and know what your rights are and what your responsibilities are, and therefore where your freedoms lie.
No, thank you for that. Yeah, that add-on. And I think that's going to be the gist of our conversation today is, what are these vouchers? There's a whole alphabet soup. I've done a little bit of digging, very overwhelming. Why I'm pulling on two experts who are, people much smarter and equipped in this way than I am. And so as we think about vouchers, what would you say the number one thing to look for parents? And then also, what should micro schools be looking for? I think those are two, slightly different angles of the conversation. And let's just go with parents first, if that feels good to you. What should parents be thinking about as they're looking at these vouchers and then saying yes to these vouchers?
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
So, oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. I'll go, and then we'll rotate, because I'm sure this is just going to be like an echo chamber, because we've done so much research, and it's interesting to see the parallels in different states. But anyway, I think for parents, the most important thing for at least the parents that are in my direct community is to inform yourself of your homeschooling laws first and foremost, if that's the direction you're going to go in. Because they vary state to state. And also when we're talking about these trust funds and these scholarships, in our state in particular, it seems like it's a homeschool scholarship, but that's not actually the case. It's just the verbiage. And so it's very interesting. So familiarize yourself with your your laws and get help where you can. There's plenty of resources out there. Not only is there the internet, but there's so many communities that can give you direct support and know your laws. And then also, that's just echoes to get to know your community, get to know your choices out there because, I'm sure we'll dive deeper into this, but in my opinion, homeschooling in particular does not have to cost any more money than living life. And in our state, that's actually applicable to the law, because we have an option that's called relaxed homeschooling, in which, yes, there are things that you're required to submit and ensure that you're covering, et cetera, but it doesn't have to cost a dollar more than living. And so I guess that's my number one feedback is know the laws and know your rights and responsibilities, but also familiarize yourself with your choices. So
Wow. I've never heard of that, so I appreciate that. As far as, yeah, your state might have those relaxed homeschool laws, so dig into that. And then, education is living. That's really what,
Yeah.
pulling it into daily life. That's the beauty of homeschooling for sure. Tiffany?
Yes. So you definitely want to know your state specifically because in Tennessee it is not that relaxed. Unfortunately, we had a homeschool freedom bill that didn't pass last year. We could get into a whole lot of politics on this. I won't, but you need to do your research on a lot. There's a lot. You need to do research on the associations within each state that you're like. So we have here in Tennessee, the Tennessee Home Education Association. There's several associations in several of the states that are supposed to be lobbying and or helping homeschooling laws for homeschoolers in their state to be advocates for that, whether for or against, and to tell House representatives to vote or not vote, yada yada. I could say a lot, but we don't have time here to do that, so I won't. However, that bill didn't pass, which means that we still have a lot more regulations than what we should have as a Republican state. And like in Florida, okay, it's very simple. You register as a private homeschool. You do there's like a little assessment that you get at the end of the year. You turn that in and you're done. Here in Tennessee, if you are an independent homeschooler, which means that you are actually registered underneath the school board, you have to take all the TCAPs. You have to take all of the whatever the state testing is. You have to make sure that you submit all of your attendance records, which you still need to do if you were under an umbrella program. But then we've got umbrella programs where you're really more maybe relaxed, but you absolutely have to pay for those because now you're under a school saying that you're a private school underneath them. So they're like your go-between. And with that, there's you end up notifying the umbrella school. The umbrella school then notifies the state that you are with them. Some of them, you still need to share your amount of attendance dates. That's really all that's required from the state. But then some of them will also have you put down, what subjects you do. So it's not as much requirements in terms of from the state, but there's still requirements based on which umbrella school you go with. So there's still oversight, especially within this state. That's not every state. There's some states where you don't have to do anything. You just don't sign your kid up for the school board and you're automatically homeschooling. Not many, and that will probably end up changing, especially with the school choice dollars, because those government dollars need to be accounted for. So I hope that gives a little bit, but there is so much to be said about what you can do, what you can't do, what's required annually, what's not required. So like we have to register every year with our umbrella school and pay to be a part of that umbrella school. But does that allow us to then be more hands off? Like we don't have to then do the TCAP because our umbrella school doesn't require that and the state allows that. There's 4 different categories of homeschooling within Tennessee, and then there's a school at home, which is really a part of the school system. So it can get a little complicated, but thankfully we have AI. Thankfully we have these associations within the state. You just need to go to like HSLDA or I think Ed Choice might have some information. I'm not 100% sure, to share with you, like, where can you find this information? Who do you need to get the information from? So you can make sure you know your rights, and you absolutely want to read through the bills that have come through for homeschooling, because they are coming fast and furious. And a lot of times they're just changing a few slight words, and it's changing the whole entire outcome of what you can and can't do.
Yeah, I no, thank you for all of that. I definitely want to dig into because I wrote this down, the changing of the words, because when you agree to something and then it's changed, you have agreed to it and now you are
Right.
obligated. And I think too, as families are becoming more aware that, oh wow, I do have more choice in how my child is educated, whether that's homeschool, whether that's putting them in a different kind of more in alignment program. I just think, yeah, families, parents, caregivers really looking at what their value system is and what they want their child's education to look like. Is it going to be more child driven? Is it going to be more adult driven? Like, what fits with your desire? And that model is likely available. And then, it's up to that school to be also looking at what vouchers to accept, because they may have to have their own requirements that, depending on that school's, that founder's initial dream and desire and how they wanted to serve children, that may have to change. So it really is, like you said, Tiffany, reading the fine print, knowing what you're agreeing to, and realizing it might change. Um, that's really tricky. It's really, really tricky. Amber, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just, again, just totally relating to Tiffany and her state. And that's another thing about with the ESTF. Tiffany mentioned in her state, there's 4 homeschooling options, and then there's a schooling at home option. And that's essentially what's unfolding in our state. And so we have 3 options for actual homeschooling that are legal. And then now there's this whole new category that's outside of those 3. And people in our state, those vulnerable families, are under the impression that they can register as a homeschooling option 1, 2, or 3 and receive these funds. Whereas that's not the case. It places you in a completely different category of schooling. And again, once you get it, you accept these funds, you're under certain regulations, you're under certain umbrellas, and it's not what you might have thought, and that's fine. But what's coming up is that these families aren't aware of any of this. Like, they're just getting themselves looped into something that they're just figuring out as they go. So I've been working hard to just bring in some advocacy and help translate things for people and help them, access resources so that they can read the fine print and be able to make those choices that are right for them. Because there's 2 sides to every coin, right? And so for my family, the ESTF is not something that I'm even going to consider. And most people in our direct community feel the same way. And also, there's so many families who this actually could be a beneficial thing, because there could be good in everything, right? But it's about being empowered with your rights and responsibilities and how it actually works. And that's where I was finding a little bit of frustration with our state, because there's so much ambiguity. So it's like, I want there to be a way that this could be good for certain families, because maybe you have a family who is in public school and their child is struggling. They need another option, but they are not necessarily ready or wanting to dive into homeschooling option 1, 2, or 3. So maybe there's a transition year for them, and maybe these funds could work for a year for them. But how can we ensure that they are able to make those empowered decisions, and that this does end up successful for them and their child? And if and when they want to pull out of that program, are they able to? So that's kind of where I'm noticing some gaps for sure.
That's my question.
Yeah, because
That's my question.
And we just don't know, because every day these things are changing too. We're talking about acronyms changing. We're talking about the differences in what you're required to do as far as testing goes, and what these funds are being used for. And again, in my family, my direct community, we're not interested, even as far as to say that, like, registering my child under a class wallet and get digital ID, all those things, that's just not something that we're interested in. Now, some families, they're not faced by that. I get it. And so I just find that my role in the community is just illuminating what all is actually happening, so people can make informed decisions. It's similar to medical freedom, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
something that
I'm glad you mentioned.
Go ahead, Tiffany.
Real quick.
Yeah.
about getting in and out of these programs. So let's say, yeah, so I need a transition year, or maybe I'm just coming into this and I'm thinking, oh, okay, maybe I then lose my job or I then have to transition to home or whatever. And we still need that income coming in to at least cover their schooling, you know? But then maybe the following year, like I get a work from home job. And so now we don't need those funds anymore. Can we get out of it? That's the huge question. Can I like come out of that and then come into one of these others? Now, what's new within Tennessee, which is not quite related, but it is kind of related, is like it has to do with state testing. And if the students fail on their state testing, then they're not allowed to homeschool anymore. Don't quote me on it. I think I'm like just kind of layman's turning it here. However, the question then becomes, okay, so the kids who don't do well on their tests that are in the public school, are they then forced to go to homeschool? No, it's
Right.
just it's one-sided.
Yep.
So now we're seeing this one-sided, okay, well now you're not allowed to homeschool. And if you have any truancy issues, that also doesn't allow you to homeschool. So there's a lot coming down the pipeline. There's a lot of regulation and there's a lot of ambiguous types of terms that are coming. And it doesn't help when we have parents that are like, oh, well, if I'm just a part of this association, they're going to take care of everything for me and I don't need to worry about it. Absolutely not. You need to be reading these bills.
Yep.
Yes, the legal terms are hard to understand. Yes, it might be a little challenging to fully comprehend. But you are your child's best advocate. And if we have 30,000 parents calling instead of one organization calling, that's a little bit different hitting the capital. Okay, so we've got to think about that. Like, we do have the numbers, and we absolutely can advocate. There is enough of us to do that because now homeschooling has grown exponentially over the last, 5-6 years. So we need to say, okay, can I do this? What is possible? And some of them don't even they don't have the explanation or the definition of these laws really there's gray area that even they don't know. So
Huh.
now we're coming into the issue of, okay, well, how do we know that we're being compliant? How do we know that we legally have the rights to do this? They don't even know because it's so
Yeah.
new.
It's
Exactly.
really, really, you know, Amber, you said the word responsibility, and Tiffany, as you were speaking too, like if parents don't understand what they're getting into and then they're not complying, that's more justification for government to come in and punish everybody and take rights
Correct.
away. So at the same time, when they're changing their own stuff anyways, gosh, it feels like a lose-lose. That's
Mhm.
terrifying.
Yes.
And it feels very unfair whenever kiddos in the standard system have their own struggles, failing, whatever, being pushed through, and yet they're going to tell those, on the other side what to do, how to do it, all the things. I just have this like, yeah, you check your own green, make sure your grass is green on your side before you start trying to water my grass too. Like, yeah, definitely.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that, Amber?
Well, I think that's a good segue to kind of talking about how this impacts programs, right? So like in every state's different, first of all. And in our state, we have these options for homeschooling, which means there's a lot of programs who are coming in, whether it's a co-op, alternative learning, a micro school, what have you, private school. And so now you're seeing different programs taking advantage of this funding, right? I'm not saying in a bad way,
Sure.
but I'm saying that it is an uninformed way because there isn't enough information. Like Tiffany said, it's like there's so much ambiguous wording and we don't know what's actually happening and things are changing in real time. So for a program to be accepting this, like if you're an organization that can accept the funding, I don't know about that. Like I said, this doesn't work for my family. It doesn't work for most people in my direct community. And it's not something that we would ever consider accepting because of all the reasons that we've discussed. And there are some organizations that are doing that. And so for me, it raises questions. It's, why are you accepting that money? Okay, well, a lot of the answer is accessibility, right? So like if a family can now get this quote unquote scholarship and apply it towards this co-op, then they're able to access it as where previously they might not have been able to.
Right.
And I understand it. And my opinion is you offer the scholarship as an organization, as a community. What are you doing in order to raise funds and who can pay it forward? How are you connecting with your community so that it can be low cost? Like to me, there's so many solutions that doesn't justify
Require the government.
to do this. So that's where we are now. It's like you're starting to see it pop up, and then you're like, wait, but don't do that yet. Do you know? Did you know? And that's where I started. That's kind of where I start the conversation, or jump into the conversation where it's like, did you know? You know.
There is someone out, I think in California. Her name's Lizette, and she is working on, what did she call it? It is called something. We just talked about it on our podcast. So we just did a podcast on this on my podcast for our whole series. We have an ESA series going on, so be sure to go check it out because we dive into what are all the definitions and what does each state have. Not 100%, but we do talk about a little bit more in depth. And one of the topics that we were talking about was that SGOs, which is scholarship granting organizations, can be formed in each state to help privately with the exact same thing that the government is now requiring. However, you still have to regulate it. There's still got to be some accountability, some responsibility. Somebody's responsible for giving this money. They're responsible for doing the right thing with the money, because we know, that's also a big issue that just came out a few weeks ago in Arizona, where they're like, oh, there's all these people that are using this money for education the wrong way. Like they're buying rings and TVs and all this stuff. And it's just like, okay, it's under 1%. It's under 1%. It's really not. Anyways, I could go on. However, the big thing is with these SGOs, we as the educators, we as the organizations can come together to make our own scholarship grants to students, like what you're saying, and take ownership of the dollars and still allow the families to have the freedoms that the government is trying to oversight and say what you can and can't do. Now, obviously, with that comes responsibility, but organizations or corporations can then donate into those scholarships and then give them to the communities that they physically touch, which is way better than them coming from the federal side or even from the state side, where now our taxes go up, our, all the other amenities, we've got inflation everywhere to help cover all the costs of these billions of dollars of educational savings accounts. So we've really got to think about, okay, how can we do this? Because it's coming fast and furious. And if we would have known, foresight is great. But what do we do now? Like I said, there's the lady that's out in California. I think it's founding or funding for founders or something. And it's for organizations to get scholarship grants for their students. Because ideally, a lot of these organizations are really not profitable. It's unfortunate, but because of how education is viewed, they are having, and because of inflation and because of everything else going on. That's why even with private schools, you can get like government funding for private schools. That's what vouchers are for. Vouchers are specifically for private schools, but now you're still under the government thumb. So then it's like, okay, well, is that going to dictate what we can and can't do? And so when we've got students that are still needing these scholarships, and then we're having schools that really still, they're barely covering their operating costs, because let's be real, we're in it because we love it and we see the impact and we see the need, but there's not always necessarily the funding to back it. And so when that is lacking, they have no choice but to, okay, we've got to accept these funds or we're going to have to shut our doors, and we don't want that. But unfortunately, a lot of the micro school world is pro school choice because that keeps their doors open. And they like that because that allows them to have a full paycheck, to have the right amount of staff, to have the facility that they need. Like all those things cost a lot of money, especially when you're dealing with disposables and just children in general, things break and have to get moved or whatever. There is a lot of cost that I don't think is recognized. And they've been shown that, oh, well, we just pay our taxes for these other schools, so why should I pay more? I'm already paying for over here, and now I gotta pay double. It's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
I'm learning so much. No, thank you. You talked about accessibility, and that was a question that I got recently as I was, posting about this, inviting people to, that this podcast was coming out, that this episode was coming out. What do those, schools want to be able to really serve all children well. Most schools do, most micro schools, the public school, and it can be very, very hard to do that. So how does accessibility, not only to funds, but to serving all kids, like how does, when we take public dollars, what requirements should come with that or not? That's also a curious piece of the puzzle. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that. I would like to talk at some point about, do you think that public funds being allocated privately is hurting public school? So that's also part of the hot topic piece as well. But what do you think? What does anyone have anything to add or to, contribute to the accessibility piece, that conversation?
I'd love to jump in for that.
Okay.
So, in the years of doing what I do and why I say that I advocate for community-led learning is all of this.
Mhm.
I've done everything from sliding scale to tuition to scholarships to free stuff to paid stuff, all the things. And I don't have a good answer for what works and what doesn't work besides get to know your community in a very grassroots way and just offer the skill set that you have. And that will be reciprocated. And like, it might sound crazy. It doesn't sound crazy to me because I've seen it, but, there's a way that you can serve your community and your community can help you also meet your needs if it's a present place-based way. And so our program has always been fully mixed age, all the things, but now, I live on a farm and there's just a natural organic community that comes with the farm. And we're seeing that there's just different ways to do things. And I know that that's not super accessible for everybody. So this is not applicable to the public school system at this moment. But we can take these concepts of real place-based learning and community building and project based learning. And we could take that and we could potentially pilot that into these different domains, even public school.
Mhm.
And I think that kind of bridges into your next question of, is this taking away from our public school system? And I think that one of the ways that we can save the public school system, if that is something that needs to happen, is to start piloting some of these things. Yep. Start piloting a self-directed learning, start piloting a urban garden, start piloting. And in my particular instance, it's the earthen oven, right? And so our last episode was all about how this is the cornerstone of a resilience as far as accessibility goes and money fundraising. It's epic for that. It's epic for connection and getting to know your actual community. And it's epic for educational scaffolding. So there's a whole episode on that. I'm not going to get into that, but it all goes back to me, in my opinion, place-based, present, get to know your community, offer your skill set and receive their skill set. So
I love that. And I think if we think about what was it designed to be? What was school designed to be at the very, 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 very beginning? It was adults contributing their skill set, multi-age, community-based. It was this beautiful in and out weaving of learning. And now it can look very, very different when it's Walmart style, big box style. And I think you're right, Amber. I think whatever grassroots organizations there are, we can go in and serve the public kiddos too. And start with the cob oven, which it's so exciting. All learning can be there, community can be built. Very, very powerful. And I think of course teachers want this. They want more centered, they want to be able to access themselves more, less box checking, more centered approaches as well. And those kids deserve it too. All kids deserve that for sure.
Yeah.
They are doing some of this. And I'll name drop here because Wonder here is great. They're down in Florida and they are actually piloting in a public school right now. And they are project-based, learning station centered, more unschooled approach to learning. They've been very successful. They have launched several microschools, and now the school system has asked them to come in and pilot a class with their learning model. So it is happening and things are taking place. And some some of the school systems are seeing the benefit of what we bring to the table. It's unfortunate, but it's unfortunate the way of the educational history and where we are right now and what we've come to, but it was very deliberate. We know that there's a lot of research on that you can find. I won't go into that here either, but before it used to be apprenticeships. You would go to work with your dad. You would go to, to the farm, to the garden with your parents and do life together. And now we've separated those two things and says, no, learning is just about books and that's separate from all the other things that we do in life. And we as a microschool movement, I know there's still a lot of schools in the microschool movement that still operate more like a school, but several of them are like Amber and myself, where we're coming out back outside. We were learning first outside. That's the best teacher, is to be outside. That's where kids connect the most. So why not go back to that? It makes the most sense. But we see that is still applicable now in our present day with all the technology that we're bombarded with. Kids need that time to connect, and they need that type of learning and community basis approach where they can really be themselves and explore and expand and be curious and not be so rushed and checking all the boxes, like we said. And unfortunately, teachers are now so inundated with all the testing and all the requirements. This is where those students fall through the cracks because they can't keep up or they need an adjustment. And the whole classroom as a whole does not have the time to wait for you to figure it out or to accommodate you. And so, even though they're supposed to be taking care of the 504 plans or the IEPs, a lot of times the teachers do not have the resources to really make that happen for those students. And it's unfortunate because they fall through the cracks and then the parents find out, and it's upsetting because the students are ultimately the ones that suffer through it.
And then the family, and then the society, and the teacher feels like a failure too. And she had so little, she trying her best, his best, whatever, trying their best, and feeling so defeated, and kids feel defeated, and parents feel defeated.
Yeah.
And so we're coming to that 45-minute mark. I think, yeah, the takeaway is, unless any of you, have something you want to add to, but the main takeaway is know what you're getting into, realize that it can change, even if you know what you're getting into. As Amber said, really take a look at grassroots movement, invite your community in, offer your own scholarships, see where you can have that sliding scale without inviting a thumb down, eyes in approach, because that's what you're agreeing to when we take money from somebody else. They have a voice in what you're doing. And it sounds like they have a voice in what you're doing anyways, but to some degree. And there's pros and cons with the vouchers. It can give accessibility, but also it can be scary too. So anybody have anything that we either need to clarify or something different, or what do you think?
I have something for providers,
Okay.
especially for those of us who are on the educator side and starting these programs. We also did a podcast with a nonprofit coach. She's a nonprofit service, and she helps you to be a founder of a nonprofit, so you can know what you're doing. But I think we also need to think about those elements and how we can benefit from how our school is run. There's a lot of founders in the micro school space that are anti nonprofit because you have a board and it can go really bad. And we've seen some really challenging things with them. There's also LLC. It just, you want to, if you are on the provider side and you haven't founded yet, or you're just looking into it, definitely look up what kind of options you have to either be an LLC or a nonprofit. There's also PMAs, which aren't quite as, there's a lot of detail in there that you have to go and research, but you just want to make sure that you're doing the best option for your type of business, because it will, you will end up finding out later, like, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that because I didn't do my research. So I didn't know what my options were. And that can also hinder if you can get grants. Now, there's a lot of private grants that you can get, like the VELA Fund. There's a VELA Foundation that you can get up to a $10,000 grant. And they even have more for nonprofits, and like a second round. So there's other ways to get funding, is what I'm saying. And that we don't necessarily need to rely on the government dollars. However, they might help up front. If you start taking them, like Amber said, can we stop taking them? Say, hey, thanks, we've taken those and now we're not going to take them anymore. So get us off your books. I don't know if it's that easy. So we really need to be doing our due diligence and ask the questions. There is a free legal aid from Yes Every Kid that you can check out, and they can help you navigate. They can't give you legal advice per se, but they can help you navigate those tricky and sticky situations, especially in your state, to know what to do with the vouchers, to know what to do with the ESA funds, and to know, like, okay, how do I want to actually operate? Because that can also change what you have access to in terms of your community, your chamber of commerce, all of that. So just wanted to throw that out there.
And I definitely think that's a topic for another episode for sure, because that can be so tricky. All the different options, everything's covered, all of that, very, very important. With all of that said, people who are interested in starting your own, your own program for kiddos, don't let fear creep in and overwhelm creep in and stop you. These kids need all kinds of options, whether it's a public school option or whatever you have in your head, this dream that you've probably envisioning forever. You can make that happen. Find your guide, get support, get connection. They can help you see all the things that you don't see at, at the top level. And so, yeah, don't stop. Don't let fear stop you. These kids need these options.
Absolutely.
And so thank you for helping me host this. Ladies, I appreciate it so much. You know so much more than me. I think we should definitely have several of these. This is such an interesting topic that's got all kinds of different nuances that are very, very tricky. And so, before we say bye, let's share how people can reach out to you if they're looking for the specific kind of support you offer. So, Amber, will you go first?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks again, Megan. Thanks, Tiffany, for being here. You can find me at unboundearthschool.org. If you want to dive into some of that logistic stuff that Tiffany was talking about, I can help you start a program. I've got a lot of expertise and I'm still happy to help with that. But what I prefer to help people with, if you're interested in, is building those earthen ovens, and letting that be a resource for your community for, again, resilience, connection, and educational abundance. And the earthen ovens are a really great way you can raise funds by building them. You can also raise funds by utilizing them. So they make really great pizza and people like to buy pizza. And so holler at me if you need any help. I look forward to it.
And we'll post her links in the show notes for sure.
Thanks.
And Tiffany.
Yes, yes. I would just say you can check us out at the Ultimate Homeschool Community Podcast. I'm on Facebook. And then we're on YouTube, as well as all the RSS feeds. You want to type in the Ultimate Homeschool Community Podcast. I know it's long, but There's several homeschooling podcasts out there to check out. You want to make sure you're getting the right one, but you will see this logo in the background. And that is really the best place to find me. If you are looking for our nature program, just to find out more about our nonprofit, we're on Linktree, and that's /Nature Explorers HC. That stands for Homeschool Collective. And on there, we have some free resources where you can get resources for homeschooling or for learning more about our nature program.
Very cool. Thank you. And I'm coming from the behavior angle. I'm, trauma informed with my foster world and just all the other components that my experience brings to the table. And so sometimes taking the walls away isn't enough. Sometimes, we need some other strategies to see what's going on underneath the behavior. And it always starts with the adult, looking at their behavior first, and then seeing what that child needs going forward. So if you have any questions about that for your home or for your school, that's how I can help. And you can reach me at connectedkidsthrive.com. And so with that, thank you, ladies, so much for being here. Thank you, everyone listening. We will wave goodbye, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for having me.